everyone. I hope you are having a great summer. We are going to start today by just reviewing some diagramming, and then we're going to talk about what makes a complete sentence. This is a review, so this is just to kind of get you going in case you've forgotten some things that we learned this year. All right, so the first thing that I want to do is just diagram some simple sentences. So let's look at the sentence, I run fast. I run fast. The first thing that you do in your diagramming, remember, is you find any prepositional phrases and put those in parentheses so that you can remember that the prepositional phrase won't be the subject or the predicate, the simple subject or the simple predicate, or the direct object or the indirect object, or the predicate nominative or predicate adjective. But we won't have any prepositional phrases in these sentences today because we're going to review that a little later. So let's start with finding the predicate. And in these sentences today, we are looking just for action verbs and helping verbs as our simple predicate. There won't be any sentences today with linking verbs. So let's see if there are any actions. I run fast. So run is our action verb. So run is the simple predicate. And remember, when we diagram, you have your baseline here, and then you have a vertical line crossing through that to separate your complete subject from your complete predicate. But on this line, you're just going to write your simple subject and your simple predicate. So the simple predicate consists of the verb phrase, which might be one verb, or it might be could be a compound verb, or it could be, and we'll review how to do that later, it could be a main verb with a helping verb. In this case, it's only one verb. It's an action verb, so it's run. So we're going to put our simple predicate there, run. And I always have you label the part of speech, and if it's a verb, I have you identify what type of verb. So it's an action verb, so we're going to put AV there, and we're just going to put a P for predicate, run. So now to find the subject, you just say who runs. And remember, the subject is always a noun or a pronoun. So who runs? I run. Now, I is a pronoun. It is we're going to put S for subject because it's a simple subject. Remember, the simple subject is the one word, or it might be a compound subject, in which case it would be more than one. But the simple subject is the main part of the subject. The simple predicate is the main part of the predicate. The complete subject will be everything on this side of the line in the diagram, and the complete predicate will be everything on that side of the line. But in class, when I say subject, I really mean simple subject. And when I say predicate, I mean simple predicate. Okay, so I run fast. There's only one other word in this sentence, and it's fast. So we have to figure out what fast is modifying. And let's look at it and see what word it adds to the meaning of. It adds to the meaning of run. Run how? Fast. So fast is an adverb. So we're going to put fast on a line slanting up to the word that it modifies, and we're going to put adverb. Okay, I run fast. So an adverb modifies a verb, an adjective, or another adverb. An adverb tells where, when, how often, and to what extent. To what extent would be words like very and quite and really. So adverbs modify verbs, adjectives are other adverbs. Adjectives modify nouns or pronouns, and they answer what kind, which one, how much, or how many. So if you need to review that, you have notes on that in your binder, and you can review what adjectives and adverbs do, but I think most of you have that down. So I run fast is our sentence. We finished diagramming that one. Let's go on to another one. Let's do the young child cried very loudly outside. All right, again, normally when we diagram, we find our prepositional phrases first. We don't have any in the sentence. You want to always have prepositional phrases and none in the sentences that we're diagramming today. So now we can find our predicate. And in these sentences today, I already told you they would be action verbs. And in fact, I'm going to add one more word to this sentence. Okay. So let's find any action verbs, and that's cried. So I'm going to make my baseline here, and I am going to write cried. But look, there is a helping verb with cried. Remember the helping verbs? We memorized the helping verbs. If you need to take those out sometime and go ahead and make sure that you still know them. There are 23 of them. Am, is, are, was, were, be, being, been, have, has, had, do, does, did, can, could, will, would, shall, should, may, might, must. And it will help you to just have these memorized so that when you see them, you'll recognize them as helping verbs. Now remember the ones that I've circled up here, am, is, are, was, were, be, being, been, the forms of be. They can also be linking verbs when they're used as the main verb. But when it's used with an action verb, it's a helping verb. It's helping that verb with the meaning of the sentence. So we have our verb phrase then is has cried. So that is the simple predicate. Had cried. Had is a helping verb. Cried is an action verb. That is our simple predicate. The whole verb phrase is a simple predicate. Now, who cried? Who cried? We're looking for the one word that's going to be the simple subject to go on this line, child. The other words with it are modifiers. Child. Child is a noun. The subject of the sentence is always a noun or a pronoun. It's a noun, and we're going to put S for subject. So child had cried. Now we can add our modifiers. Let's see here. So we have the child. The, an, and the are always adjectives. They're called the article adjectives. They are always adjectives. A, an, and the. So the child. Young. Now let's look at young. And if you're thinking, I think that's an adjective, don't just assume and put it on the adjective line. Ask yourself which question it answers. Does it modify first? Does it modify a noun or a pronoun? Well, looks like it modifies child. Child is a noun. So now ask yourself, what question does it answer? What kind, which one, how much, or how many? What kind of child or which child? Young child. So young is definitely an adjective. Please don't put something down as an adjective unless you identify which question it is answering about which word. Young child, the young child. Okay, now, had cried very loudly outside. So we know that these words must be adverbs because they're modifying this verb phrase. And an adverb modifies a verb, an adjective, or another adverb. So let's do loudly. Had cried how loudly? Loudly is definitely an adverb modifying cried. So ADV, had cried loudly. Okay, so what about very though? What word does very modify? It's not very outside, it's very loudly. Very modifies loudly. What part of speech modifies an adverb? An adverb. Adverbs can modify other adverbs. It's that one that's telling to what extent. Loudly to what extent, or how loudly? Very loudly. And when an adverb, remember, modifies another adverb, it just goes like this. ADV for adverb. Okay, so we have very loudly. Now outside. You might see outside and think, oh, that's a preposition. It can be if it has a prepositional phrase following it and an object, remember, outside the house, then yes, it's a preposition. There's nothing following it. It can't be a preposition without a prepositional phrase, without an object of the preposition. So in that case, it's an adverb. Cried where? Outside. And there are a lot of words that can be prepositions or adverbs. Outside. Cried where? Outside. So outside is an adverb. So let's look and read the sentence and make sure we've got all the parts. The young child had cried very loudly outside. Okay, we're going to move on now. Actually, we're going to do one more, and I want you to diagram it and then check it. So I'm going to go ahead and write a sentence. Let's see. The very loud dogs barked let's see, I'm trying to think of one that's not a prepositional phrase. The very loud dogs barked let's just say outside. Again, the very loud dogs barked outside. Okay, I want you to pause that video, pause the video, diagram it yourself, then we will check it together. So push pause, do your diagram, and we'll check it. Okay, let's check this one. The very loud dogs barked outside. Remember, I said there wouldn't be any prepositional phrases, so we don't have to worry about that. So let's find our simple predicate, which is barked, and it is an action verb. Who or what barked? Dogs. Dogs is our simple subject. Remember, the simple subject always has to be a noun or a pronoun. Dogs barked. Okay, now let's add in our modifiers. We have the dogs. Remember, the, and the are article adjectives. They will always be adjectives. The dogs, loud. What kind of dogs? Loud dogs. So loud is an adjective modifying dogs. And what about very? You might be tempted to put very here. Very dogs? No. Very barked? No. Very loud. Very modifies loud. What part of speech modifies an adjective? An adverb. Remember, an adverb modifies a verb, an adjective, or another adverb. It tells to what extent, loud to what extent, or how loud, very loud. Very is always an adverb. Okay, so now we have barked outside. We have outside again. Barked where? Outside. And it is an adverb. Now, if it said barked outside the house, outside would be a preposition. It would have an object, house. But here, without an object, it's an adverb. Barked where? Outside. All right, let's read the sentence. The very loud dogs barked outside. Okay, so every time I send a video, and it's just going to be every couple of weeks during the summer, we will review a little bit more with diagramming. So we'll do a little more diagramming next time. Remember, we've talked about nobody is going to ask you, probably in a job interview or on the street, hey, can you diagram this sentence? That's not going to happen. But the reason we're doing this, the reason it's important is as we get more and more into usage, and you've already seen that when we started talking some about subject-verb agreement, but even more when we get into using pronouns and whether you use I or me, subject or object pronouns, you have to understand the parts of the sentence. And we have to have a common vocabulary to talk about those things. If you don't know what a pronoun is and you don't know what a direct object is, you cannot learn subject and object pronoun usage because you don't have the common vocabulary that we have to say, okay, so I use me as an object pronoun, so I'm going to use that as the object of the preposition or the direct object or the indirect object. So that is why we are doing this, so that we will have the tools to understand the usage rules that we are getting ready to get into. All right, so now let's move on. We're going to talk a little bit, review a little bit about what makes a complete sentence. A complete sentence, remember, has to have a subject, it has to have a predicate, and it has to be a complete thought, has to express a complete thought. Has to satisfy all three of these to be a complete sentence. If it does not satisfy all of these three, then it is what we call an incomplete sentence or a sentence fragment. Subject, predicate, and a complete thought is what it has to have to be a complete sentence. Okay, so let's look at, we're going to look at some sentences and we're going to decide whether they have subjects, predicates, and are complete thoughts. I want you to try to think of the answer. We're going to do this together, but I want you to try to think of the answer, even pause the video if you need to while you think of it, and then see if you got it. You'll learn more if you're actually trying to think of the answer yourself as we go over these. Okay, so let's look at this. Let's look at this first group of words. Trying a double somersault. Trying a double somersault. We've got to figure out if that is a complete sentence. Does it have a subject? I see an action. Trying could be the verb, but who is trying? It doesn't have a subject. We don't have to go any further. No subject. It is a sentence fragment. If we wanted to make it into a complete sentence, we might say, he is trying a double somersault. All right, let's look at number 2. She barely caught her partner's hands. Let's see. It has a subject, she, predicate caught, she caught. Is it a complete thought? She barely caught her partner's hands? Yes, it is. Now, guys, don't overanalyze this part about it being a complete thought or you can confuse yourself. You might think, well, who's she? Who's her partner? That's not what it means by a complete thought. It means if that sentence were to be in the context of a paragraph or conversation, would it be a complete thought? Or does it have a word on it that makes it sound like there's more coming? Like let's say it had a when on the beginning of it. When she barely caught her partner's hands. That's not a complete thought because you want to say, when she caught her partner's hands, what? It's a part of a sentence. You can tell there's supposed to be more. Otherwise, it's a complete thought. So let's look at the next one. As she began the triple. All right, well, I see a subject and a predicate. She began. But as she began the triple, what? That is not a complete thought. Remember, that's what we call dependent clause, and we'll review that more later. But it needs more. It needs more to stand alone. As she began the triple, comma, she screamed. As she began the triple, she laughed. Or as she began the triple, the audience gasped. That would be a complete sentence. All right, she fell into the net. It has a subject, she, predicate fell. Is it a complete thought? Think about it. Is it a complete thought? She fell into the net. Yes, it's a complete thought. It doesn't say if she fell into the net or as she fell into the net. There's nothing in there that makes you think, well, what else? What else? As she fell into the net is a complete sentence. The crowd gasped. I want you to try to do that one. The crowd gasped. I want you to think, pause the video if you need to, see if it has a subject, see if it has a predicate, see if it's a complete thought. Okay, let's look at it. Crowd is the subject, gasped is the predicate. It's a complete thought. The crowd gasped. It is a sentence. It doesn't say if the crowd gasped. If the crowd gasped, what? Or as the crowd gasped. No, it is a complete thought. Those words, remember those subordinating conjunctions, often those are clues if there's not another part to the sentence that it might be a dependent clause. All right, even the clowns turned and looked. Even the clowns turned and looked. You try to figure that one out. Pause it and try to figure it out. Does it have a subject? Does it have a predicate? Is it a complete thought? Okay, it has a subject clowns. It has a compound predicate turned, looked, and it's a complete thought. Even the clowns turned and looked is a sentence. Was she hurt? Pause it and try to figure that one out. Okay, let's see. It has a subject she, predicate was. Was she hurt is a complete thought. It is a complete sentence. Let's look at number 8. Rolled off the net to the ground. Try to figure that one out. Pause it. Find the subject, find the predicate. Ask yourself if it's a complete thought. Okay, so has a predicate rolled, but who rolled? Who rolled off the net to the ground? It's missing a subject, so we can stop right there. It's a sentence fragment. It's not a complete sentence. To make it a sentence, we need to give it a subject. She rolled off the net to the ground. Number 9, smiling as she waved to the crowd. Pause it and try to figure this one out. Okay, well, I see an action. I see a predicate, smiling. I don't see a subject for that, though. So that's a sentence fragment. She was smiling as she waved to the crowd. And then the last one, she was fine. It has a subject, she, predicate was. It is a complete thought, so it is a complete sentence. Now, don't be fooled, guys, by thinking that if it's short, it's a sentence fragment, and if it's long, it's a run-on sentence, which we'll review a little bit later. But don't be fooled into thinking that long sentences can't, or long groups of words can't be sentence fragments. Look at this. As she waved from the moving bus as it pulled away from the station where her parents were standing on the platform in the rain. I mean, I could just keep going, but it's still a sentence fragment. As she waved from the moving bus as it pulled away from the station where her parents were standing on the platform in the rain. What? That subordinating conjunction is what is making it a dependent clause, and it cannot stand alone. Now, if we didn't have that as, then yes, it would be a sentence. And by the way, it still wouldn't be a run-on. She waved from the moving bus as it pulled away from the station where her parents were standing on the platform in the rain. Would be a complete sentence. Add that as onto it. It's a dependent clause. That as makes it sound like we need more after it. As she waved from the moving bus as it pulled away from the station where her parents were standing on the platform in the rain, she smiled. Then we could have a complete sentence. So don't be fooled into thinking that sentence fragments are short and run-on sentences are long. Okay, so the last thing that I want to do with you today is go over how to do your editing exercise. I'm sure you remember how to do this. I'm giving a little more detail because I'm also going to be having, there's going to be a couple of new students joining our class in the fall, so I'm trying to give a little more detail on these videos to help them. So let's look at this. Let's look at this editing exercise, and these are all due on I think I said August 15th. It'll be in that email. You can do them as you get them. That's probably the best way to do it so that you don't forget it all over the summer. There'll be one every couple of weeks. Do it as you get it. Or, I mean, if you want to, you can wait and do them all in August, whatever your parents and you and your parents decide on that. After you do these, though, I want you to send them back to me, and I'll explain how to do that. You're actually going to, well, I'll explain that in the email. But anyway, you'll get this back to me, and I will grade it and get it back to you so I can see how you're doing on it. All right, so the editing exercise says, find the error in 8 of the 10 sentences below. 2 of the sentences do not have errors. Correct each mistake and label with the following numbers. Now, this summer, we're going to be going through all of these errors and reviewing all of them. But most of you should be pretty familiar with these. We just talked about the sentence fragment error, but there will be all kinds of errors. 2 of them are correct, though. So you're going to read the first one. If I go to bed too late, I will be tired tomorrow. You've got to figure out if that is correct or if there's an error. Now, if you're not sure, go through each one. Is it a sentence fragment? Subjects, predicates, can stand alone. Is it comma needed after an introductory dependent clause? Oh, if I go to bed too late, is an introductory dependent clause. There's no comma, so I'm going to put a comma, and I'm going to put a number 2 because it is, the error is number 2, so you're going to correct it, and you're going to put the number. If it is correct, you can just leave it blank, or you can put a C after it for correct to help you if you need to. If there are any of these that you aren't sure of, you can ask for help. You can look them up. So just do your best on that and get it back to me. And then I will send another video and editing exercise in, I want to do 2 in June, so it'll probably have to be a little sooner than 2 weeks, maybe toward the end of next week. All right, thank you.